This weekend, coming back to Tallahassee, Jalen Ramsey, Derwin James, Jameis Winston, Cam Akers, Kier Thomas, Jay Corbin, Jermaine Johnson, Snoop Minnis, and others. And then a little baseball fun one there is Buster Posey also coming back this weekend. We mentioned some of the guys that are going to be on campus. Cam Davis, Charles Lester, both 5 stars, a couple of 5-star tight ends in Thomas and Williams, a couple of big-time offensive linemen in Daniels and Jason Zandamela, Luke Cromenhoek, BJ Gibson, a ton of guys on campus this weekend. Richie, should help recruiting a ton. But I think it speaks to something a lot bigger than just recruiting. When you talk about these legends and you talk about these guys that are coming back, the absolute heroes of Florida State over the last decade or so, it's pretty special to see. And it's really, really neat to see them giving back and coming back. Our fans at times have complained, oh man, you see this guy on the field over at Ohio State, or you see this guy on the field over in Gainesville, or you see this guy over on the field in Tuscaloosa. And why do guys never come back in Tallahassee? Well, there hasn't been a very enjoyable product to watch. It's the same reason you guys weren't going to Tallahassee the last 4 or 5 years, because you didn't like what was happening on the field. Florida State, winning fixes everything. We've talked about that. We've talked about how important it is to put a successful product out there on the field. Richie, you talked about it a little bit, just kind of overall thoughts in our last video that was on recruiting. But any big takeaways from some of these guys coming back? Or do you have a favorite guy that's coming back? Like just some general thoughts on what will happen this weekend.
I just think it's awesome in general, right? You love seeing the greats come back to Tallahassee, right? When you think about it, Jameis, obviously Heisman Trophy winner, national champion. Same with Jalen, obviously not a Heisman, but a national champion. Derwin James, even a guy like Cam Akers, who committed to what he thought was a program that was on top of the world, and his career didn't go well from a wins and loss standpoint. He still had a great career himself, but he's still all about Florida State. And you think about the Mississippi guys that Florida State has had success with, that only helps. And then I really like the fact that Kier Thomas and Jermaine Johnson are coming back, because we touched on it in the last video that Mike Norvell is very active in the transfer portal. Here's 2 guys that started their careers at South Carolina and Georgia, came to Florida State, and they are all no-blooded, 100% Florida State. That only helps as well, because obviously you're not recruiting the transfer portal hard right now until the next window opens. But when you have transfers that say, hey, I was at Georgia, Jermaine Johnson can go to these high school kids and say, hey, I was at Georgia, great program, but when I came to Florida State, it was different. This was family to me. And that's going to resonate with these kids, because these guys have been at multiple colleges and they settled at Florida State, finished their careers there, loved Florida State, and all these guys are in the league right now. It's just a really big deal. And I think if you're a high school recruit, Jameis Winston still holds weight, right? Jalen Ramsey and Derwin James certainly do. So it's just a big deal for Florida State. And I love that Mike has put in the work. Now he's reaching out to these players, and they're receptive to say, yeah, Coach Norvell, I'd love to come back and help you land some of these elite high school talents you have on campus.
Yeah, no, it's been pretty impressive to watch. And exactly what you just said is one of the biggest takeaways for me, is that most of these guys still hold so much weight in these current recruits' minds, right? It's getting up there, right? The next time that we circle the calendar, it will have been 10 years since the Noles won it. But right now, they still remember this, right? Like, 18, 19-year-old kids still remember when they were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old watching the national championship, watching Jalen and Derwin. They certainly see most all these guys that we have listed still in the NFL. And so I think that's important. You look at your rivals, and they have to go back, one of them has to go back about 20 years for any kind of relevance, right? And the other has to go back somewhere in the middle, about 15 years, right? When Florida was in 08 and won their last one. And so I think, like you look at Tebow and stuff like that, like he certainly still carries weight because he's still in the media and still has a presence there. But most of those Gator legends are, like guys weren't around. Kids, recruits now don't remember what happened 15 years ago. And they certainly weren't even alive the last time Miami won a national championship. And so I think that it is important. It is big for Florida State to be able to sell that success, to be able to sell those guys that they grew up watching and that they cheered for. 10 years ago, it was cool to cheer for FSU. 5 years ago, it wasn't so cool to cheer for FSU. No. We still did it. We still rocked the team, but that wasn't cool. Nobody was rocking FSU gloves out at 7-on-7. But that's why all these kids, that's why every single one of them tells you that Florida State was their dream school. Because when they were 10 years old, that we were the best thing going. And we were winning like crazy. And so Florida State needs to capitalize on this and needs to go out and win another one, because otherwise you're getting too far away. You're getting into that Florida and Miami range of that territory of it's been way too long. Florida State won 6 years apart in the 90s and then won 14 years apart after that. And so we're getting close to that 14 again. And you almost do need to win it every decade or so to remind people of your relevance and to remind people that you are still there, and so that kids do grow up with you as their dream school. And so I think that's a big aspect. I think them coming back, being around the program, Jameis is going to not only hang out with some of the football stuff, but he's going over to the Buster Posey game, I read, and that's really cool. Obviously, it's really cool that he's going to be there when some of the two-sport athletes are on campus. Cam Davis, who I know let me tell you this too. There are people in this fan base that will intentionally try and rally you guys up and tell you guys that there are problems with certain recruits because they said they're excited about visiting another school. Kids should be excited to go on visits. Like, please relax and try and consider the source when these idiots out here are telling you that there are major problems with Cam Davis or anybody else telling you that he's excited to go visit LSU. Heck, I'd be excited to go to LSU. LSU's a cool freaking place. They've got beautiful food, they've got a lot of beautiful things in that town. So I'll just say that.
Beautiful woman, you can say it.
No, I just want to. My wife's right in the other room, man. I'm not trying to get yelled at. So, but yeah, Cam Davis going to be there, two-sport athlete. James is coming back to be able to talk with him. That's going to be incredible. And so I think that the strategy that's going into this, the recruiting efforts that are going to go into this, just what it means for the program overall. We were talking off air. Jameis came back in 2015 when Florida State played. I don't remember who we were playing that weekend, but he came back in 2015 when the Bucs had a bye week. He was obviously at the Ole Miss game. He was at the game in New Orleans this weekend. And again, it's becoming cool this year, but it's becoming cool to be a Florida State fan again. And I think that these guys coming back are just kind of evidence of that. So I don't know if we get any commits this weekend off of this, but I do think that if you were ever going to commit, wouldn't it be when Jameis was on campus? That's what I would commit. I mean, I'm a homer. Jameis is in my bio. I get it. But Richie, if it's me, I'm committing with Jameis and Jalen and Derwin on campus.
And to your point, TJ, man, if I was a 5-star elite high school football player, like my upbringing and everything, I'm most likely going to commit to Florida State. But I'm going to wait, and I'm taking all 5 official visits. You better believe that. Why would you not? And as a parent, I think you're doing your child a disservice not to encourage them to take all those 5 official visits that they should get. Because why not? Again, it just makes sense. It's free, visits. You get wined and dined, and all these coaches think they have a shot. That's the great thing about great recruiters, right? They think they can land everybody. You could be a 5-star solid commit to Ohio State. Jimbo Fisher was convinced he could land you, though, right? That's what made him so good at Florida State. And I think Mike Norvell's starting to enter that territory. He's going to have to close the deal on signing day this year to really enter that arena. But, man, I would absolutely do that. But, yeah, man, if I'm a 17-year-old high school kid going into my senior year, especially if I'm a quarterback or a running back, I mean, imagine, I know he's not coming or he's not reported at least, but Dalvin, yeah, I'm going to commit when he's on campus hosting me. Why would you not? I just think there's nothing bad that can come from next weekend or this coming weekend for Florida State in recruiting. And again, I cannot give enough kudos to this coaching staff for organizing to get all these guys back on the same weekend. It's one thing if you get Jameis one week, Jalen the next, Derwin the next. No, they're all coming the same weekend. And that was very obviously orchestrated. And again, kudos to the staff.
Yeah, I don't know if, so I don't want to give credit where it's not necessarily due, but I do know that Corey Fuller is your director of football relations.
Yes.
And so I would have to think that you've got to give a little hat tip toward him. Kewan Ratliff is your director of player relations. So I do think you probably need to give a little hat tip to those guys who probably had some coordination in some of this. Obviously, Fuller with a very good relationship and, being close and chatting with some of those guys that he'd be trying to bring back and having been a former player. So anyway, hats off to those guys. Again, I haven't been told specifically, like Corey Fuller organized all that, but I know that some of those guys behind the scenes don't get enough credit. So shout out to them. Excited to see what comes of it, Richie. Like having Jameis back on campus is never going to be a bad thing. So I'm excited to see what happens there. And hopefully we get a couple of kids to pop, because again, no better time to commit than when Jameis is there, or Derwin or Jalen or whatever the situation is with that. But I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Garnet and Gold. You can go to garnetandgold.com. So I got the Buster Posey stuff out there when I was up there this weekend. Buster coming back to Tallahassee this weekend. Talk about everybody coming back this weekend. Mike Norvell even got Buster back. So go get you some Buster Posey gear or whatever kind of FSU gear you're looking for. You should only be shopping at Garnet and Gold. Or if you're not in Tallahassee, you can go to garnetandgold.com. You can use code NOSLAW, NOSLAW. You can get 15% off of your order. They are the absolute best when it comes to customer service, speed of shipping. They've got great prices, and then we'll save you 15% with code NOSLAW, NOSLAW, for 15% off.